Hey Shashank, welcome to the Startup Operator podcast.
And insurance is a necessity. It is not a luxury. You could say 70% of India is actually covered. But the real challenge is not coverage, it is the under coverage. Demand is the mother of entrepreneurship. We've sort of built an ecosystem which has both a demand and supply side. Without demand, there is no ecosystem. For people in a hospital, the first thing they want to do is just get home.
Yeah.
Right?
The last 4 to 5 years have been a little topsy-turvy. How do you make sure that you are doing what you have to do?
For entrepreneurs, whether it's 2021 or 2022 or 2023, what I tell my team is the first priority is to run a business profitably.
Why don't insurance companies focus on the customer experience more, right? Hey Shashank, welcome to the Startup Operator podcast. Thank you so much for making the time.
Thanks, Roshan, for having me in your show.
Awesome. So, of course, I like I mentioned, we should have met. We should have spoken at least a long time back. We have, multiple connections and so on, but better late than never.
Super happy to be here, finally.
So, Shashank, I think your background is interesting, right? You've been a consultant, worked at places like Accenture, BCG, and so on. So I have this theory that there are two types of startup founders, right? One who pursues like a problem that they experience and then try to solve for it, and the other who kind of look at the market in perspective, figure out like where the gaps are, and do that whole Excel TAM and whatnot, and figure what they can do, right?
Yeah.
Now, which of these founders are you, right? And in that, while you're covering that, you could also perhaps talk about the founding journey of Alyve.
Yeah, sure. No, thanks for the question. The short answer is it's a bit of both, and I'll sort of explain that to you, right? So I used to be a partner in insurance in BCG.
Right.
I specifically worked in consulting, but largely in the insurance space. I started my career with E&Y, went to Accenture, went to BCG. So lots of lateral movements in the same space. Some work in banking, but predominantly in insurance, right? So from that perspective, it was very clear to me that the health insurance market was going to outstrip motor, which was the largest line in the general insurance space, right? And that actually has happened just after COVID, right?
Right.
COVID has sort of accelerated that, but it was bound to happen. The other thing which I experienced when I was working with some of these large companies is that everybody was speaking about a health ecosystem, right? And trying to build customer-centric products in insurance. Insurance is one of the most hated categories
The
for
lowest
a consumer.
NPS, right?
Lowest NPS across everything. And
Right.
at BCG, we used to look at every space.
Right.
To give you a sense, the insurance NPS in the country, and I'm talking about just before we start Alyve, was 13 to 16%.
Wow.
Right. And then as Indians, we are very generous in giving ratings. Okay.
Right.
So for example, when you open savings account, so that particular journey, the NPS for private sector banks is about 40%.
Right.
Right. It's not like anybody's wowing you today, but we are generous.
No, to do poorer than airlines takes some special effort for sure.
And interestingly, when it comes to claims, which is called the moment of truth in health insurance, the NPS is about 6%, right? So basically, large market. The total healthcare expense in the country is about $250 billion today, which is multiple lakh crores if you do the math.
Right.
The product itself is very restrictive. Like you need to get hospitalized, and over a period of time, they've kind of moved from a 24-hour hospitalization to daycare, right? But you basically have to undergo an event which is quite emotionally draining, and the experience at that point in time is not very good, right? So a lot of the companies, it's not a new concept. Health ecosystems have been spoken about, as early as 2010, 2015, there was a wave. But what happens, Roshan, is that capital in the insurance industry, as in any industry, moves towards the most near-term benefits you can show to your shareholders. And in insurance industry, insurance distribution was the main guzzler of capital, right? So every insurance company which got set up, and including the new age ones, the first thing is, can you actually set up distribution to sort of go out to customers, because insurance was always sold as a concept, right?
I think that's a key point to cover, right? So one is that insurance is sold and not bought. Nobody wakes up one day and just like impulse buys an insurance policy. It's usually someone who calls you, or like an ad you see, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of, when I was part of many of these board discussions and CEO discussions, everybody wanted to design and build a customer-centric product, right? And it's therefore it's not a new thing. But immediate priorities were not to do that, and till date that's the thing. So it was very clear to me that this takes an entrepreneurial effort to sort of do this, to actually build a complementary product to the overall health insurance traditional product which is out there, which can actually be customer centric, which can see customer pull. Right, and I'll come to this in a bit, right, in terms of penetration and where we are today as a country, right? So this is the I would say the market view,
Right.
which I came in with in
Right.
Early 2018, 2019. I started thinking about it, and there's an idea which is not a brainwave, or it's not like an overnight, you're sleeping and suddenly you wake up and sort of start this. This idea has been brewing for many, many months, because the way the market has evolved,
Right.
and what I've been hearing from the market, right? Personally, 2018, 2019 was very tough because my father went through multiple hospitalization events, right? So when you do that, what happens is any event actually has several connected events. For example, when your loved one is hospitalized, you typically have to get scans, X-rays, MRIs, which probably is out of hospital. You will need to consult with. You start with the GP, then you move to experts, and more often than not, you have to sort of navigate through multiple experts, multiple pathways. And what I realized then was that the cognitive load on the user, and here I am, who's sort of been working in the space since 2008, right? And I genuinely felt a sense of helplessness moving through this journey, right?
Even with your level of perspective.
Exactly. And what I basically reflected upon this and basically thought was, if I was going through this after being privileged enough to have worked in the space for such a long time, and insurance is a necessity. It is not a luxury. That means imagine people who don't understand the space, right? What would they do? And to give you an example of this, right? My father is obviously well educated, and he was retired at that time, but he needed me to fly down from Mumbai to Bangalore every time. So every event, I took time off, one sabbatical as well, to come here and figure this out. And he's been paying an insurance company, and the ideal entity in my mind to sort of hold this experience.
Right.
Is the insurance company, because for them it's a subscription product, and keeping you healthy, keeping you out of hospital, keeping you happy actually makes a lot of sense for the insurance company, right? But here you've sort of paid premiums over say 20 years, 30 years, and then you're sort of getting into this experience where you have to stand in a queue, right? Where everything else in life had become so easy. If you look at even booking train tickets, used to stand in queues earlier. Now it's like click of a button. Booking, ordering food is easy. But healthcare is it was a very tough experience, right? So that's when I kind of made up my mind.
Why do you think that is the case? Because it's always sort of puzzled me that why don't insurance companies focus on the customer experience more, right? Because if you think about it, it's a recurring product, right? I mean, it's a recurring purchase, sorry. every year, you have to renew it. And this is maybe 20-30 years of business, right? So why don't they focus on it? I mean, at the time of renewal, you'll perhaps get one call and one email, which is literally happened to me last week. But otherwise, there is no check-in in terms of like, hey, can we do something? Has there been an event that we can help you with? So on and so forth, right? So why is there not enough incentives for the insurance folks to do this? Because I also noticed that if you look at persistency ratios, which is the number of people who are on the same policy 3 years, 4 years down the line, they're pretty bad for most of the companies, right?
Yeah.
So why isn't that fixed?
It's a great question. See, it all starts, like if you think now the other end of the spectrum, like there are incumbents, giants in the industry who are earning profits, so it's a profitable industry. Many of them have gone to an IPO. So the businesses are actually and lucrative. It's a category which is growing at 30% year on year for many private sector players, right? Now, what has happened in the country is that, look, out of the $250 billion of healthcare expense, the only about $100 billion is actually in scope of the current product. Okay, more than 50% is actually out of scope.
When you say in scope, I mean, this is like the hospitalization expenses
Exactly.
And so on and so forth.
Exactly.
So something like outpatient, all of your secondary, tertiary services will not be covered, basically.
And that's because insurance is defined that way, right? The whole industry follows what is called the Insurance Act, which was drafted in 1938. It's gone through, I think, 1 or 2 amendments after that. That's all.
Wow.
Right? Now, insurance is defined for events. Okay, so the whole thing is about the probability of the event and the severity of that event. Right? The insurance itself, the concept is basically for events which are low probability and high severity. Okay, so for example, this studio, you could sort of insure it against earthquakes, for example, or fire, right?
Yeah.
It's low probability, but severity is very high, and that's what insurance is meant for. Okay, right. The word insurance and the entire industry is actually following the letter of the regulation and the law. So by design, if the probability is low, nobody's going to come knocking on your door and say, hey, can we do something about it, right?
It's like an umbrella you don't want to use, basically.
Exactly. Yeah. And which is why out of the $250 billion, only $10 billion gets paid from private insurance. The entire industry
crazy
accounts for just 4 to 5% of the total healthcare expense. And we've been in this space for decades as a country, right? As a world as well, but as a country, you have more than 4 million agents / feet on street people trying to. So we discuss it's a sold product. A lot of people are trying to sell it, right? And despite all of that, we have achieved a healthcare spend penetration of 5%. I'll give you another corollary, right? I mean, for great products, right? D2C as a model actually should work. Insurance should have been flying off the shelves of the online aggregators. It doesn't happen. So even when insurance is sold online, and you're looking for it, as a person, you've gone through a healthcare event, maybe of a loved one, and you feel now time has come to cover my rest of the family, right? You go online, do all of the search, and as per the research that we used to do in BCG, a lot of people actually search online. But when it comes to buying, the straight through, so hardly anybody just adds insurance to cart and sort of get, because it's a product where you're buying it with the hope of not using it at all. That's the problem, right? You're like the umbrella that you never want to use. And the companies which sell it also don't want you to use the product.
Because they'll have to pay out.
Yeah. So in a world where every other product, you celebrate a purchase. You buy a pair of sneakers, you unbox it. You gift it, right? this is as emotionally as a product, as the traditional insurance stands, is a product that is almost, you don't want to touch it. Right? You've bought it and you have some, some policy document lying there, and you hope and pray that you never have to use it, right? And which is what we as Alyve are trying to change in the product proposition.
Yeah, I mean, people talk about the fact that, there's so many jargons and it's tough to figure, copay and sublimit and all of that stuff. But think about a car, right? I mean, there are thousands of things in a car that I perhaps don't understand, right? I mean, if you ask me. But I use it because it's got a certain utility to it, right? So when you think about India, right, and you mentioned penetration also, I don't know what it is, maybe around 15% right now. And that too, I think within that, if you eliminate all the companies that are mandated to provide insurance and so on, I mean, it'll be far lesser, I suppose. If you compare this ecosystem to, let's say, the US or UK, where it's primarily driven by, insurance, right? I mean, I think only perhaps the very, very rich and affluent folks will be able to do something outside of it because healthcare expenses are so high, right? Do you think we are headed to that place, or and of course, I mean, there are certain challenges with those places as well, right? With healthcare expenses getting jacked up and so on and so forth, right? I mean, they say that doctors really don't make money; the insurance folks make money, and we've seen that insurance in US at least has become super consolidated, right? I mean, there are maybe like 4 or 5 of these folks there. So if you could just compare and contrast these ecosystems.
Yeah. So broadly, there are two types of markets. Okay, one is government-funded market, which you see in UK, for example, right? So they have something called NHS. National Health Services. If you're a UK citizen, whether it's for a scan, which is outpatient, anything which happens outside a hospital, any kind of outpatient care, doctor consultations, etc. Or it's, for example, if it's a pregnancy or it's a hospitalization event, NHS actually covers it, right? Now, this model is predominantly for countries where, and we're talking about, public hospitals largely, but even private hospitals joining in, and things like you don't have to pay for your healthcare. This happens when the country has a certain level of affluence, certain level of policy where you're moving significant amount of taxes collected into healthcare, and you can afford to do that, right? So this is one model. The other model is where it's largely private paid. Right. So the US market is an example of this kind of market. Some of the European markets are examples of this kind of market, where you have public sector coverage for the very poor. So, for example, there was a lot of debate when like Obamacare was launched in the US, right? And sort of some of that is continued, but largely it's private based. And even if it's private based, what the models which have come out is in terms of group coverage. It is actually the organized labor markets which cover people, right? Because it gets over a period of time, and like you rightly said, some of these markets, the insurance premiums have just gotten way too expensive, exorbitant, right? India is very unique in the sense that we've discussed that health insurance today mainly covers the hospitalization part, and that's what sort of the product was designed to be like that. But it's also unique because India is actually many countries in one, and we've heard that, right? So there is a Singapore in India, and there is also like an Africa in India, and so on and so forth. So what has happened here is the bottom 50% are covered by a scheme called PMJY. So, and this bottom 50% are identified by what is called the SEC classification, right? Socioeconomic classification, which means that approximately 75 to 80 crore lives get what is called a Ayushman Bharat card,
right?
Okay. And out of them, as per the last data that I saw, about 35 crore cards have been issued out of 80 crore, right? So it's a massive initiative in that sense, right? The very top 0.5% or 0.3%, you can argue that, they don't even need insurance, right? I mean, they can afford to pay out of their own pocket, right?
They'll probably start an SIP or something.
Yeah. Now, the middle India, which is, you could say mass affluent plus, um, and roughly, so if the way we divide it is, there is India 1, which is about 150 million lives, and then there is India 2, who don't get the Pradhan Mantri scheme, and who also don't have the resources to kind of maybe purchase their own policy and so on and so forth, right? So think about our drivers, the house help that help works. All of them do not necessarily get a Pradhan Mantri Arogya scheme, right? So this is India, and within this as well, as of date, you have group insurance, which is corporate sponsored, and then there is retail, which is both individually bought as well as individually bought but subsidized. So if you're a customer of a bank, like a public sector, private sector bank, they'll typically run what is called a group retail scheme. So as per data, even that is part of group, but it is bought and then it's discounted and so on and so forth, right? So this entire, the premiums collected is roughly about $10 to $12 billion as of date, right? In this entire space. So India, whether it will move towards the US model or the UK model, my short answer is, look, for India, for government to start covering everybody, we as a country do not have that privilege or resources as of now, right? Only about 2 crore Indians pay income tax, right? About 10 lakh crore of income tax is paid by 2 crore people, right? That's not enough to kind of, cover everybody, right? So it's a start. They were also talking about covering people who are above 70 years of age and, like the senior citizens, which also is a good thing. But the real challenge for India is not just coverage. If you look at this metric, how many Indians have a policy in hand by all these government, and there are other schemes. I won't get into it now. There's a employee state insurance scheme and so on and so forth. Only about 25% or 30% of Indians do not have insurance policy in their hand. That's it. So if you go by this metric, on paper, you could say 70% of India is actually covered. But the real challenge is not coverage, it is the under coverage, right? To give you a sense, if you look at all the government schemes as well.
Wow, 70% have some
policy. Because government is anyway covering a 50% of the population. And out of the remaining 50%, the coverage is 15-20% of that, right? So I'm saying 70% have something in hand, right? So the problem is not coverage. Problem is under coverage, both in terms of value and the network. So in terms of value, the coverage, like we discussed, is, say if you have a 1 lakh cover and you have to get hospitalized for it, typically if 100 people are covered, only about 5 to 8% of that get hospitalized in a year. The remaining don't get hospitalized, but they incur quite a lot of expenses outside of hospitals, right? So which may not be covered at all. Okay. So this is one. So value of coverage is one. Second is the network, right? So if you look at all the government schemes, it's been tough to convince the private sector networks to sort of join forces, because the prices as per billing code, that's the key point of discussion, debate, disagreement. Whether it is economically viable for the network to join in. So you have a lot of government hospitals where healthcare is, essentially free. Then you have quasi-government or some of the private sector hospitals which have actually joined forces with them, where these policies can potentially work. But, how much of your expenses can these policies cover today? That is the real problem. That is the real problem today.
Okay, you see this massive problem, right? And the need to build a customer-centric product. How do you go about doing it? Because sometimes when you see such a massive problem, right? I mean, you might bite off more than you can chew, right? You might get overwhelmed, right? So what is that wedge that you saw, which is like an entry into solving this product. I mean, solving this issue rather. And yeah, how do you go from idea to product to company?
Yeah, so this was actually the toughest thing for us, to be honest, when we started, right? And when I had to convince my co-founders to join in, and the toughest thing is, like you said, where to start, right? So what we basically said was, look, we'll start with the customer. Let's look at the customer and let's target, for example, customers who uh, who will definitely be interested in an outpatient coverage. And sort of let me explain that, right? When you look at India, like, if you look at India 1, 2, 3, India 1 is, 150 million lives, right? Most of them have some type of policy. It's not that they're not insured, but they don't have a customer-centric product, right? Um, and they have enough healthcare expenses. So to give you a sense, typically about 8 to 12% of any household expenses is on healthcare. It's quite substantial, right?
Yeah.
Even if one doesn't get hospitalized, because you have vaccinations. If you have kids, for example, you have regular vaccinations, regular visits to doctors, and then preventive care, checkups,
Lifestyle.
and so on and so forth, right?
Yeah.
So pretty sort of wide. So we basically said that, look, this is the first thing we said. We'll go to areas, we'll go to the segment where there is demand. That is number one. Number two is, unlike most startups, most startups basically start off saying, look, there are incumbents which are not working for you. I'm an alternative option, right? I'm the alternate to the incumbent. We basically concluded, and this is again coming in from the years I've spent, we concluded that the incumbents actually are playing a very important role, right? They have a massive distribution footprint. They are already selling a traditional product, which is actually required. It is not that everybody's got this fear of hospitalization, right? So you need to get covered. And we, as a early stage company, we don't want to reinvent that part of the wheel. But what we want to do is, we want to sort of be able to collaborate with the incumbents and take to market a much better product, right? That's the route that we took. And because I spent years and years, I have a lot of respect for what the incumbents are doing, right? There is a reason why it is hard for incumbents to get into categories like outpatient plans. And then coming back to the definition of insurance, we operate in high probability and high frequency, right? So, for example, will most of our members actually visit a doctor in any given year? Absolutely, yes. You'll have a visit, right? So in that way, to be very honest with you, under the strict definitions of insurance, this is not actually insurance, right? What we are doing, it is, the way we like to look at it, is it is a health plan, which is a massive complementary product to the regular insurance products which are there, because it just sort of differentiates the offering, 10x.
But hang
Right.
on, how do you
Yeah.
get if you are not, writing these policies yourself, right? How do you get the incumbents to sign off on like outpatient as such? Because and why haven't they done that?
Yeah. See, there is. There are two questions in this, right? The answer to the first one is really, demand is the mother of entrepreneurship. There's no substitute for demand. If there is demand, we've sort of built an ecosystem which has both a demand and supply side, right? Without demand, there is no ecosystem. Okay, there is no business. So over a period of time, and I think what has happened is, and then suddenly COVID has been a tailwind, right? The demand for outpatient care first started emerging in companies such as MNC groups, which basically said that, look, we follow a certain comprehensive healthcare policy elsewhere, and you'll have to follow the mothership's policy, right? So demand started emerging from there, right? And as demand emerged, insurance companies, receive this demand from the other stakeholders, like brokers, for example, right? We also work quite closely with some of the largest brokers, and so on and so forth. And we as well receive that demand, right? Because when there is demand, you have to fulfill that demand, right? What do you do as an insurance company? You need a platform which is basically designed to fulfill this demand, right? And in a way, because we saw this coming. Now maybe it's accelerated a bit because of COVID, but this had to happen in a country, right? Because what has happened is the API economy sort of came together. Now from the government side, health stack is sort of coming together, right? All of a sudden, it was conceivable to actually build this ecosystem,
Right.
which can potentially fulfill this kind of demand, right? To answer to your second question is, like I said earlier, building this from scratch for any insurance company, it's possible. It's not that it's not.
Yeah.
But it is almost like building a company.
People might even pay a higher premium, right? I mean, because if it's a relatively high frequency purchase,
Exactly.
then yeah, I mean, people might pay more, no?
That's how it's transpired today, right? So in the choices, so if you're a incumbent insurer, in terms of the choices over here, you have billed by your partner, right? A lot of people, so it happens in any industry, right? So when there are early stages of demand, coming in, your capital allocation model is not designed for this demand coming in. It's a niche, right? So what you typically end up doing is you start partnering, right, to start with. In the future, people may consider buying, right? But it's already very clear that build from scratch model is a massive entrepreneurial effort, to the extent that you literally will need to create something like us, because it's not just tech. There is tech, there is customer experience, there is a new way of designing products. For example, what we are able to do today in terms of the health plans that we offer is we are able to look at a very micro segment and customize a health plan based on that segment.
Right. But are you writing the risk also on this?
So most of our business is actually in collaboration with insurance companies. So in that way, it is the risk is on the balance sheet of the insurance companies as on date, right? But there are models, and I won't sort of get into it in this conversation. There are models which are linked to either a profit sharing or a risk sharing models, which are sort of coming up now.
Okay.
But early days yet.
So it's the same policies, but you have opened up this outpatient sort of a avenue, right? Now, if I were to look at it from a carrier perspective, what's in it for me? Like, you're not helping me get new customers, right? You're helping me service my existing customers, and you're saying that there's a higher probability that I might have to pay out like claims.
So the answer to that is what you just said, a few minutes back, right? These policies, when the premiums for these policies are not the same premiums, right? The premiums is an add-on premium.
Got it. So this is an add-on, basically.
It's absolutely an add-on.
Right.
Okay. Now, it is also not true that it is the same customers. It's actually opening up new markets.
Right.
And the regulator has actually gone about, and they've sort of issued circulars recently, and they promoted what is called the value-added services as a policy framework.
Nice.
Right?
So I can have like a primary health insurance plan somewhere, and then I don't know, maybe add like a diabetes policy.
Exactly.
That's from somewhere else, and an outpatient policy from
that's
Alyve
the point.
and so on.
That's the point. And it's not just for health. This policy is also for life insurers. So the life insurance market is much larger than the health insurance market. Number one, right? All of a sudden, what it opens out is the incumbent carriers with the power of their distribution network. having this power to say, look, I can actually fulfill the demand. It might have started in the corporate world, but it's soon going to sort of move to the retail world, which we're seeing today as well, right? So all of a sudden, it opens up this entire demand for both, health insurers as well as life insurers. So to look at this and say, here is an opportunity for us to sort of meet this demand. And this is where we as Alyve, one of the early calls we took is that, like I said, we are here to actually collaborate in an open architected way, which means we actually work with multiple general insurers, multiple life insurers, multiple brokers, and we are in fact enabling this, right? All within the framework of the regulation of the country, right? And that is an important part, because every time a carrier goes to market, they can only go to market if a product is filed with the regulator, right? And when it's filed, the design of the plan is also encompassing how is the plan going to be fulfilled, because it's very easy for, like, you and me can sit in a room and write a policy out. We'll cover the doctor consultations, but how does an end user access this? That's where again Alyve comes in. We are the front end,
like a concierge service
application, not just a concierge. Concierge is part of the offering. We have three parts of our product, right? So first is we're an integrated ecosystem. So anything that you book on Alyve, the product promise is that you can access it in a cashless manner, right? So you book a doctor consultation, you can walk in, walk out, from the clinic, right? And it's comprehensive, and that's the first one. Second is it's assured service, which means there is a concierge, there is a care guide who's assigned to every order, who's actually guiding you through the entire process. So if you book an annual health checkup, somebody will call you the previous night and say, please fast from so and so time. The test will only start at this time, right? And so on and so forth. So it's an assured experience where there is 100% transparency in terms of what you're going to go through, and there is a care guide. And third and most important for us is it's proactive well-being. Okay, so one of the things that we want to change is before Alyve and after Alyve, how active and healthy are our members. Okay, and this is where I think you also alluded to that. Personalized health plans, like manage your diabetes out here, or get 50% off on your gym membership starting today till whatever date, right? And this is how we engage people to do things. And then we actually want it to be high frequency, low severity, which is why you need tech. Because if this were to be run manually, this can never make money, right? Because the frequency is high and the ticket sizes are lower for every transaction, right? You need tech to sort of reduce your OPEX to the same level as a profitable business, and you need tech to look at data and say, okay, what should a particular member be doing, okay, at any point in time, and you need tech to also be able to help the insurance companies price a plan out, right? So this is what we do. We actually collaborate with the large incumbents and help them meet these demands through very custom made health plans, right? So that's what we offer.
Man, when I listen to the business as a whole, right? I mean, I see there are so many moving parts, right? I mean, on one side you have to partner with the carriers for the product. On the other side, you have to partner with all of these folks, whether it is hospitals or whether it is like gyms or whoever else, to actually service the demand. And then there's the customer itself at the center of all of this, right? How do you manage the customer experience when the end, what is that? I mean, like the last mile is not in your control per se.
So I'll just take you through what are the parts of this ecosystem, right? Just to give you a good sense. Like I said, we have a demand part and a supply part, right? On the demand part, I've sort of walked you through various demand channels which are there. And once a customer is onboarded, they actually use an application. It could be, you could be logging on to your carrier's app, but we would probably be integrated out there. So you move into a single sign-on kind of environment into the Alyve environment, right? Now comes the supply side of things. Supply side, and this is why this was something that we thought about for a long time. And exactly the question that you asked, like, how do we sort of build the supply, scale supply? The approach we have taken is, it's a dual approach. Okay, so one is we've got integrations with suppliers who are aggregators themselves. So you could have a gym aggregator or a tele consultation aggregator or an in-clinic consultation aggregator, pharma at home, right? So you have most of the reputed brands of the country actually supplying to us, and this works through APIs, okay, which also gives our members the assurance that their requirements sort of taken care of. You can track your booking till the time the reports are fulfilled, or till the time you get your medicines at home, right? In some categories, for example, diagnostics, right? We have had to also forge partnerships ourselves, because some of the supply categories are fragmented by default, right? There is no pan-India diagnostic behemoth today, like especially when you look at center, right? So
Apollo, no.
You would look at Apollo as an option, because Apollo also has an Apollo, and then we work with Apollo a lot. But when you look at India as a whole, India is a super complex country, right? If you look at, for example, something like a Visakhapatnam, a certain pin code, and in our philosophy, we don't want any of our customers to travel for more than half an hour to reach a center, right? So there are regional champions. Okay, so if you go to Mumbai, for example, there would be somebody like a Suburban or NM Medical, right? If you go to Hyderabad or Telangana, for example, there would be a Vijaya Diagnostics, and they are champions in their region. For example, so it's a very deep understanding of what is the supply side. Okay. Now comes the point as to how do we sort of ensure great experience, right? The way we look at ourselves is, again, open architecture is the key word. We want to be able to give the end user the choice, okay? So, for example, when you come and try and book a diagnostic from us, we will tell you near your PIN code what are all the labs and hospitals that you can potentially opt for, right? We will also tell you these are covered in your plan. But for example, if you go for a high-end hospital, say Medanta, you might have to pay a little bit extra to do that.
That's an option.
That's an option.
Yeah.
Right. So the way we look at ourselves as a product company is, it's very similar to what traditional insurance has been doing, because they basically tell you that these are the cashless hospital network, and you can sort of go out there. And then you've chosen the hospital, you've chosen the doctor, it's, you're going to your family physician. That's what happens, right? That's one. Number two is, like I said, we track every order. Okay, so today, roughly, we do about 2,000 to 3,000 transactions a day. Okay, wow. That's the scale we are in. And we track every order on our internal dashboards. Okay, and the key point here is whether the member has kind of interacted with the provider. For example, has your Flebo reached you? Is something that we can see. And what's the delay for every order? And if there is a delay, take some proactive measures.
Flebo is the person who comes and collects your sample, whatever that is, blood sample and so on. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. Similarly, if you've taken a gym membership or purchased it from us, right? Whether, for example, your voucher code is active, your QR code is active, you've actually leveraged it, right? So this we track on every order basis, on a no-name basis. It's something that we are very clear about. That we don't want to know who's doing it, but we want to know whether an order is getting fulfilled in the right manner or not. If it is not, If it is not, then we take some actions.
Hmm.
We work with our supply partners. In everything, there is a Pareto, right? While we are a massive horizontal platform, you will see that 80% of transactions are with 20% providers, right?
Right.
And
Right.
large, most of them would be aggregators.
Right.
Um, it is not easy. Like I want to sort of it's not a solved problem yet.
Right.
I'll be foolish if I came here and said we have sort of done it, right?
Right.
But it is required. Okay,
Right.
so if for a true customer-centric health plan experience, you need to do this.
True.
And when we started, and we pretty much got laughed out of most rooms, right? Or how can you combine sports and a gym and a doctor consultation in one plan, right? But we somehow had that conviction that, and then we as consultants, like my co-founder Sushant as well as Vineet, we are all from consulting background. And our only advice used to be do one thing and do it really well, right? So go deep into something. And that's the typical startup advice as well.
Right.
But here, this is an ambitious horizontal play, okay? And unless you do this horizontal, this is the reason why our traditional companies have a low NPS today, right? Because they restrict themselves to low frequency, high severity, and then if you're getting into the high frequency game, then you better have options for the customer. So we are open architected in terms of demand. We are open architected in terms of supply, right? We work with multiple providers, and we give the choice to the so much so that we've just launched a new product called Alyve Pay, where you can actually walk into even your family physician, scan the UPI QR code out there, and your insurance or the OPD wallet will actually get debited. So it's not coming from your bank account. It's a UPI transaction which happens, which basically removes the network out of the equation, right? So whatever be our network, we anyway have a pretty big network. But for a user, I can actually walk into my doctor's office and scan and come out, right? And that is the philosophy with which we want to build this. Give maximum choice to the user, and make it as scalable as possible for the user.
Right. So I have a few follow-up questions, right? So one is like, when you look at insurance in general, I mean, the incentives are so misaligned, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, the insurance companies want you to buy their product but not use it, because then they'll have to pay for it.
Yeah.
Right. And similar with hospitals as well. There's friction between hospitals and carriers, and then there is TPA in between, and it's again questionable how their incentives are aligned and so on, right? But you as a platform, you're trying to bring all of these different elements onto one simple, seamless experience for the customer, right? How do you get these people to kind of like work and row in the same direction?
See, there are two worlds out here. One is the inpatient world and the other is outpatient world, right? As of now, we control, or you could say that on the outpatient world, we're very confident about the customer experience and what we have to offer, our product promise out there, right? Because that is something which is completely designed, brought to market by us, right? Now, very interestingly, for the inpatient world, what we allow you to do, we allow any company to just connect their group medical policy. It might have been bought by them directly or through another broker. It doesn't matter to us. Okay. We've also integrated technologically with 4 of the largest TPAs. We are also integrated with some of the largest HR management systems, right? So that when you register a claim, you get a real-time claim registration number of a policy which is not sourced by us at all. We are not a broker, we are not an intermediary in that fashion. We just let you connect it, right? We also have a service where you can talk to our claims expert and just get an understanding of what happens. We don't process the claim, right? Understanding of what happens, and that facility is also there, right? So in the inpatient world, this is what the product is today, right? Now with health claims exchange coming in, and then we are sort of looking forward to or hoping to also integrate ourselves with the health claims exchange as well.
You'll have to explain that a little bit.
Yeah. So what happens today is that the interface between the hospitals and the insurance companies is, and when I say hospital, any provider, there is no real one interface between the hospitals and the providers, right? If you go to a hospital, and many of your listeners might have sort of gone through hospitalization experience, you have something called a TPA desk at a hospital. TPA stands for third party administrator.
Right.
Even though it's called TPA desk, the person, the staff out there is actually a hospital employee. Okay, he's just helping with the insurances. He'll ask you a few questions in terms of what your policy is, whether it's corporate, retail, etc. Then he does bunch of alt tabs. So there are so many windows which are there. So he keeps going to the window of that particular. So you can imagine there are 33 general insurance companies in the country. Many of them do health as well. So many windows are typically open. And he's then at that point in time, he's actually checking you in, right? And to add to the complexity, every hospital follows their own electronic medical record, EMR systems, which is different from what insurance companies follow. And therefore, this person is actually uploading PDFs on this screen. So if your insurance company's insurance ABC, the ABC window will open. He will sort of, keep uploading the PDF. On the other hand, there is a doctor or a claims processor, whether it's from a third party that the insurance employs or themselves. They look at all these PDFs and they try to form a sense of what this claim is about and try to adjudicate. This takes hours and there is a lot of to and fro, which is why even after a doctor tells you that you can get discharged now, most people who have not done this before think it's done, right? It's like swiping a card, you just say this is my insurance covers it. But it takes on average anywhere between 2 to 4 hours
Wow.
on average. Sometimes it could even take a day. And there's a lot of friction because while 2 to 4 hours for people who have not gone through this experience seems very low, for people in a hospital, the first thing they want to do is just get home.
Yeah.
Right? And at that stage, if you're told that no, you can't, and there is no clarity, and there's a lot of to and fro happens, and after the to and fro, then they say that, look, this is what the insurance company is willing to, pay up. And the reason why they don't let the patient get discharged is because the financials are not settled. Right? Then how do you recover? So in case it doesn't get settled, what happens? How does the hospital recover the money? Right? So with the health claims exchange, what's going to happen is all of these windows will be a single window clearance. Right? I think the first phase is just a single window clearance. But the true disruption over here is if the...
And this is mooted by the government, is it?
This is mooted by the government.
Okay.
Interestingly, there's a health ministry and the finance ministry. So National Health Authority, for example, the Pradhan Mantri insurance scheme actually comes under the health ministry, which is the governing body is the NHA. And many of your listeners might also have got something called an ABHA ID, which is a unique health ID, which is again a concept mooted by the health authority. So they've used the technology they're using in the PMJY, sort of they're trying to leverage that on the health claims exchange. Most of the insurers have signed up, so there is collaboration between ministries, between the NHA, IRDA, and so on and so forth.
Right.
There have been multiple sessions that they have sort of taken. So insurance companies had to sign up for this. And over a period of time, the idea is to move all claims into what is called the National Health Claims Exchange. Right? They have also, at least, put it out there that health tech companies such as us can potentially get connected with this kind of exchange. So that, say, for example, our member wants to register a claim, they can register irrespective of whether that policy has been, sold on Alyve, or it could be insurance company 123, it could be a TPA's third-party administrator who processes the claims for many insurance companies, and it could be a hospital ABC, right? So you could potentially register the claim through a health tech, any health techs, not just us. Now the and very important insight here is that the real value of this entire thing is when billing codes are harmonized. So what happens, Roshan, is every hospital follows a billing code system. For example, give an example, like removal of appendix is, say, billing code 123 in one hospital, it could be 56 in some other hospital, right? So if that is harmonized, then you can actually process a claim in real time. Okay, it's almost like everybody's using their own charger, iPhone and Android and whatnot. And here are only 2 or 3, but imagine the compatibility. So with the health claims exchange, I think the logical next step, and I hope that this happens in the country, is when there is a standardization of the billing codes. So you can imagine now that you will have a billing code 123, customer ID ABC, going to the health claims exchange. The provider is has a code. The insurance, so everything is codified, which means even the policy starts getting codified, right? So all your exclusions today, which probably run into pages, can come in and say, if it is removal of appendix, I pay you up to 1 lakh, is already codified in my policy. So I compare the policy with what I receive as a claim, and then it's real time.
Wow.
Right? So without this billing code harmonization, it's a incremental step, in my honest view, right? But it's a necessary step to move to the ultimate.
Right.
Now, what I also hope will happen is that first thing is, after the inpatient, these harmonizations and standardization will also move to outpatient, should move, right? When you will start seeing that there is enormous efficiency in the system. Anybody is claiming from anywhere, and sort of, if you're a member, you can sort of just claim, and if whoever is the insurance company, based on the policy, there is straight through processing, and maybe only 5% or 10% get into a manual workflow, right? So things are changing very fast, and I think it's for the better. But time is of essence, because health stack and health claims exchange, these are concepts which were being spoken about since 2018-19. But I think it's absolutely the right step for a country. And with this, the amount of time and cost which can get saved in the system is enormous, right?
Yeah.
So that's
the digital public infrastructure that we're building is just phenomenal, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, miles ahead of anyone else.
Absolutely.
I had a question on tooling, right? Because I have some experience of working with the technologies of all these insurance firms and so on. Most of them are running archaic systems.
Yeah.
Right? You said that it's an API. So you're pulling inventory from somewhere, you're pulling customer details from somewhere, and passing it on to other systems and so on. What's the tooling like, and how much hair did you lose, trying to knit all of this together on one interface?
Yeah. See, for us, as of now, honestly, because it's almost you could say it's almost a new category that is getting built. This is not a very big challenge when there is a new category. I'll explain why. See, every product which any insurance company launches is filed, and when you file it, there is a gestation period of about, I think, 2-3 months sometimes to get that product onto their core system. Okay, because the product has to be filed and so on and so forth. Now,
which the code base is in COBOL or something like that, right?
Might be, yeah. But the way insurance companies also managing this is they've also smartly, over a period of time, said that there are these legacy systems that they have, right? So you typically have a core system, okay? They've tried to relegate that to a system of records. That's the only system of records. Then I try to manage my my API hits on a system which is probably on top of this, and which is built to sort of talk to my core system. Okay.
Right.
And most insurance companies have released pretty good API kits. Okay. Where somebody like us can actually collaborate with them.
Nice.
And do this. this also, takes me back to my experience with BCG, where I've actually seen some of these, older systems. I've seen some of these insurance companies trying to sort of, take it to the next level in terms of tech. And a lot of them have traversed a fair bit in terms of just being, like startup friendly, right? Having said that, uh, like where they find it a bit tough is if you have to personalize in real time. So for example, Roshan comes on Alyve, and we've sort of built that tech to say, okay, based on what you're doing with us, we can actually tell you what you ought to do, or what you should do, and give you an offer on that, right? And that is where I feel that there is a certain dictionary out there that insurance companies have built, which they build it such that it can cover pretty much everything. And if we operate within that dictionary and working along with their tech folks, we are okay. We are okay, and we should be okay. And therefore, what the net result of all of this is that customers actually get a great experience. The product is an insured product, right? So you have the trust of someone who's backing this product, and the platform is us.
Right.
So, and in a way, think about it this way. I think you've got, like, parallel is banking, right? So banking has core banking, and a lot of banks have done a fantastic job in releasing the mobile banking apps and sort of doing that. And then there are new banks who've sort of come in and but in insurance, actually, because of the low frequency, there is no equivalent of a mobile banking app. There is an insurance app, but you probably use it only when you claim, right? And which is where, again, somebody like us comes in and says that, look, we are the gateway to high frequency, low severity, right? We have these integration toolkits sort of built out. It's almost like we are providing this platform as a service to many of the carriers, and working within the ambit of the regulation of the country, right?
So if you were to abstract away from everything that you're doing, right, and you see things in perspective, what are, like, 2 or 3 things someone should keep in mind while building a platform business? Where you're trying to get various stakeholders together, incentives may not always be aligned, the customer is at the center of things, and you have become that one throat to choke for everything, right, that you may not control. So for someone who's listening to this, perhaps watching this, if they want to build a platform for something else, right, I mean, wherever, what are some 2 or 3 pointers that you would give?
I think the first thing is demand, right? You have to be very,
you
very
should have a compelling demand, right?
Yeah, you have to be very sure, and here it's easier said than done. It's where there's a famous quote where you have to skate where the puck goes to, right? When we started, a lot of people said, like, who will offer OPD, right? I mean, so the world is full of, and that is why sort of it makes sense to start where a lot of people don't have the same view, but you need to have a pretty confident thesis on the demand, right? Is there demand, and demand not just now, but like a permanent demand, or at least, and it's sort of shaping up now, right? So that there's a momentum of demand, right? So if the demand is going to grow by 5%, or is it like a demand doubles every quarter, for example, right? So there's a difference there. Second thing I would say is, see, these some of these things are often misunderstood. Like, what is a platform, what is an ecosystem, and many times, like, builders may get caught in in the jargon world, right? Honestly, doesn't matter. So for us, when we looked at it, a lot of people ask us, who's your customer, right? Is the insurance company a customer? For us, we are very clear, the end user is the customer, right? Because end user determines demand. If there's no demand, insurance companies also cannot sell this product, right? Corporates cannot offer it to their employees if all the employees say, what is this you've offered me, right? And so on and so forth, right? So I think it's very important to kind of declutter. It's so, if it so happens that you have to build something to meet that end user demand, and it is called a platform or ecosystem, great, but I would say third is when you're starting off, it's very hard, because I think you also alluded to this in the initial part of the conversation, that the supply side will ask you, where is the supply, where is the demand. And the demand side will ask you, where's the supply, right? And you need to be very fortunate here, because there was COVID. The only supply which we needed were teleconsultation and RT-PCR, and we could kind of try to double down there, generate demand, fulfill the demand with a good customer experience. So luck plays a role, a very important role. Right?
No, but
So,
again, I think the longer you
Yeah.
stay at it, the luckier you get, I feel, right, in business.
Maybe.
Because you started in 2018.
No. So interestingly, I quit my job just before COVID.
Okay.
So Feb 2020 is when I quit my job.
Right.
And the three of us came together around August 2020. So, and then we started building, and then we went to market in 2021, because we had to build a basic product and basic ecosystem to go to market.
Right.
So we've been in business since 2021. So it's been
Right.
about 3 years.
Right.
A little more than that. Yeah. But
So instead of doing all of this stuff,
Yeah.
wouldn't it have been easier to just build another insurance company for outpatients?
In a way,
Because I'm assuming that you are earning some brokerage from each of the partners that you work with, right? And in
Yeah.
order for you to increase your margins, at some point of time, you will have to think of your own product. Considering that IRDAI has, especially under the new director, Mr. Panda, right? I mean, they've been very, very forward thinking in figuring out newer ways of insurance and so on. And penetration is like a huge priority for them. Wouldn't it have become an easy
Yeah.
thing to do that?
Yeah, so there are, I think, 2-3 things. One is, as I've said, we were very clear about what the missing piece was, which was OPD. We built our technology, our product centered around this missing piece, right? We were also very clear that there's no point in reinventing the wheel. You actually work with the incumbents, right? Now, I've had discussions with, for example, the ministry, the regulator, and they're very forthcoming. So first thing I want to tell your listeners is that, it is a wrong notion to kind of maybe tinker in your garage and think that the regulators or the ministry is actually not forthcoming. They're very forthcoming.
Yeah.
They give you time and so on and so forth. There are 2 or 3 aspects here, Roshan. One is, till date, what we do is actually not part of the Insurance Act, right? So in a way, what the regulator has basically said is that it is a great product which goes very well with insurance, right? So it is insurance companies can do it. It's not part of the Insurance Act as of now, but insurance companies are encouraged to add these value-added services, and they've sort of allowed them to experiment in a big way, right? Second is, from our perspective, we are all ears to figure out, how the country wants to sort of take this forward, right, in terms of regulation. And because there are a lot of things which happen which is in the probabilistic domain, which is not insurance and which is not regulated. And just to give you some examples, like when you do Apple Care, right? If you break your screen, for Apple, that's a product, right? But it's a probabilistic product. But is it insurance? Maybe no, right?
Kind of an insurance.
And these, and for me, one of the reasons why I decided to also build my career in the space of insurance is because it's linked to probability studies. And there is probability study everywhere around us, if you look at it.
The world is probabilistic.
Exactly. So if you go to a restaurant which does thalis, that also is a plan.
Right.
Okay, what if somebody goes and eats everything 10 times over, right? That also is a plan. But is it insurance? The answer is no, right? In the Mumbai local trains, very interesting thing is, there is a ticket checker who comes once in a while, right? So what I've at least heard is there is a pool of travelers who pool the risk and say, if a ticket checker catches somebody, we will sort of we will sort of foot the bill. So it's not legal, but there is probability almost everywhere.
Right.
Okay. Now all of that is actually not insurance. So for example, Netflix's subscription, more you watch Netflix, higher is their tech costs, because video play is
Streaming.
very expensive,
Yeah.
right? Electricity which it requires, the maintenance requires, very very expensive, right? YouTube. Now, all of these aspects are actually subscription products which have probabilities which are built into them, right? So the way I look at what we do is in that sense a customer-centric offering, which is linked very very well with data and probabilities. Now, I don't know, for example, whether the regulator would want to regulate if they want to, right? But we are very clear in our minds that this is the space we want to play in, and we want to be in a space where we can actually collaborate with other carriers, because those are there is demand out there, right? And maybe because of that concept, the regulator may be looking at it carefully, and that's the sense I get, right? But there is some way to go for because if the first step is it has to be part of the act. Right now, in what form and shape it becomes part of the act. So a bill has to be sort of passed, and act has to be sort of confirmed, and then comes the regulator, because regulator follows the act. Right? That's how the framework of our country works. Right. So what we're doing in the interim is obviously talking to every stakeholder, being very candid about what we do, right? How we sort of are actually helping meeting this demand, right? And if there is demand there, and if there is a way in which if people want something, and we can sort of deliver that at a good level of customer experience, there is a profit pool, right? And that's how we want to sort of build, right?
Right. You mentioned working with the IRDAI, right? And
Yeah.
and the fact that they're forthcoming and so on. What's your general experience been like working with these folks? I understand they have a supremely hard challenge, right? I mean, there's often second or third order consequences to things that they do that it's impossible to fathom all of them, right? So
Yeah.
they're a really hard job, I feel. So yeah, what's your experience like working with these guys? And if there is one or two policies that you think should come into being, right, what would your wish list be?
So I mean, the wish list is not only for IRDA. I think I had one wish which unfortunately this budget didn't get fulfilled, which was to kind of remove wave of GST in insurance or health plans, whatever we do. Because what happens is when you actually go to a hospital directly, there's no GST, or if you go to a doctor directly, there's no GST. But there is an 18% GST when you go through a plan, right? And for a product which is absolutely necessary, the finance ministry should consider waiving off the GST, or at least reducing it quite a lot, because 18% is a pretty big tax to pay, and ultimately the end user is paying that tax, right? Now coming to IRDA, to be honest, it's not that we are working with them, because you can imagine from their perspective there are so many entities which are out there, right?
Yeah.
But I would like to sort of highlight that I was extremely pleasantly surprised, when I so I just dropped an email, and I received a call from one of the senior most officials, right, as to what do we do, and how can we sort of, that's how we kind of started talking. And I think that is the point I'd like to make in this podcast, that like everybody else, even the regulator is trying to figure out stuff. And like you rightly said, it's very easy or convenient for everybody to say, hey, there should be a decision out here, etc. But it's not that easy for the regulator to make a decision, because they'll have to consider every aspect of what the decision might entail. Having said that, one example that we could look at is the banking regulation, where very quickly you had specialized licenses come in.
Neobanks and
Yeah,
so on.
like small finance banks,
Even NBFCs and so on.
for payment banks, small finance banks, even for P2P lending, they have released. If you look at SEBI, for example, for alternate investments, they have released separate, separate regulation, different grades of licenses, right? So I hope that if at all this product, and then if the regulator considers this to be, and then this is part of the act, etc., considers this to be insurance, I do hope that there is a specialized license, because a company like us is not in the business of taking very large risks, right? For example, a regular insurance company, I think yesterday, unfortunately, there were landslides in Wayanad. So these natural calamities, they get it reinsured, and that is what insurance was traditionally meant to be, and in the right spirit, that's what it should be. For somebody like us, the capital requirement is actually much lower, right? The risk profile, or any risk we take in right now in the future, is actually, it's a low risk that we take. So yes, so that is something that is worth considering, that whether there should be a specialized licenses for somebody like us, and you could name it anything. You could name it health plan tech or health tech. And the other thing that even the regulators are trying to figure out is this whole interlink between the health ministry and the finance ministry. So there is a health regulator and the financial service regulator. And genuinely, there are businesses, and not just us, there are businesses which probably, come somewhere in between, right? So that is another thing that they're honestly trying to figure out in my conversations. So yeah, no clear answer, but if there is, I think there should be a thought about, taking on at least, bringing to market, specialized licenses.
Yeah.
And then more the last companies which actually received licenses were Acco and Digit, right? Many people have applied now. Some of the industry, sort of like Galaxy, has just received its nod from Dr. Devi Shetty, just received the license. So
Yeah.
Now, what happens to early stage companies who are actually adding a lot of value? And therefore, and this again goes back to the point that maybe there is a case for a specialized license for the kind of work that we do, right? Maybe there's a case, and that is something that I'm sure will be kind of, they're thinking about it, looking at it quite closely.
Yeah. No, I think I happened to read this sometime back that healthcare is so complex, you can't have speed, affordability, and quality, right? You'll have to pick 2 out of 3 most of the times. And it's particularly tough to provide this when it is completely straitjacketed, right? So you need newer and more specialized forms of delivery to various interests and segments and so on, right? NH is a great example, for instance, that you brought up, right?
Correct.
I mean, if I'm in a 5-10 kilometer radius of Narayan Hrudayalaya, it absolutely makes sense to buy one, right? And it's pretty very, very affordable as well. We'll have to see, like, still, I mean, since it's a new product, like how things will pan out, but stuff like that ensures that insurance and health insurance particularly, I mean, becomes easily purchasable, right? And more relevant to a person's daily needs, for
Correct.
sure, right?
Absolutely.
In terms of your growth, I assume that there's a typical corporate sale. You might perhaps look at some affinity groups as well, like in the US they have this veterans and so on. Here, perhaps, I mean, maybe apartment societies or certain alumni or whatever. So that's the usual route that you've taken.
So
will you move over to the B2C side sometime?
Yeah. Okay, so a good question. I think see, there are 2 markets we operate in. We are like you rightly sort of said, we are B2B as acquisition, right? But even in B2B, there are 2 markets we operate in. One is groups of employees, which is the corporate group, right? And this group itself is pretty large. I think to give you a sense, roughly about 3.5 crore lives are covered through employee schemes, right? Still very small, but it is a large enough group, and that's what we started off with, because that's where the demand came in, and it was fairly obvious. The other type of group we operate in is customers of anchor groups or anchor companies, right? So think about customers of health insurance company, and it's quasi retail in that way, right? Or customers of a life insurance
So
company.
if you are, let's say, like a Bajaj Allianz health insurance holder, then you have,
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. So now this customer angle, what we have seen is it's actually a very, very large market. And this also is called affinity, by the way,
Right.
As per the regulation around the insurance products, right? So it's a very large market because, as you can imagine, then it opens up, like banca as a channel, for example, is one of the largest channels, right? For life, particularly for life, but also for health, right?
Again, banker is bank assurance, and basically an insurance and a bank collaborate, where the bank acts as kind of a customer acquisition channel for insurance, basically. Right?
Absolutely. So it opens avenues for banks, NBFCs, MFIs to look at this and say, can we embed a health plan in any offering? So, for example, take a credit card. It could be a premium credit card. What you get today is like lounge access, and if you go to the lounge, you pretty much don't get a space to sit. So is there a differentiated emotional, and a lot of banks and are thinking about this, and we're talking to a bunch of them today, right? Similarly, if you have if you have a loan, for example, right, and all of this is voluntary, right? The customer can say I want or don't want, unless of course the bank pays for it or the NBFC pays for it. Then in that case, it's a sponsored product, right? But this market for us, we call it affinity or alliances, like business alliances, right? And we have seen that use cases emerge because till date there was no platform to kind of talk to this demand and say, okay, here I am, sort of, you want to sort of get a plan from us. But use cases are emerging thick and fast in this, and this is a new kind of market for us, which we just launched this year, right?
Right. I was just wondering, right? I mean, so much of the front ending from a group insurance or employee insurance perspective has been taken over by startups, right? I mean, we've hosted the founders of Plum earlier,
Sure.
And there are a few others as well, right? When you guys sit at the table, I mean, I know each of you have your own differentiation as such, but what do you hear from the other side?
In a way, a lot of folks are doing different things, right? So there are folks, like I've told you my story. There are folks who, like Plum, for example, and many others, who basically started off by distributing the current products to newer markets, right? So you could look at the startup market or SME market, which perhaps was never under the fold of insurance. There was COVID, and a lot of people were looking for products which could cover small team members, right? In a way, we are actually not competing, but we are, it's a complementary offering. We don't work with startups because our target corporates as well. We work with the very large groups, okay, which basically have at their policy level to say, I want to give a comprehensive cover to my employees, and I want to be able to manage that through a tech platform, right? So in that way, we our markets may not match, but in terms of our products, we are actually complement to many of these insurtech startups. We actually collaborate with brokers, right? So, and many of the insurtech startups are actually in the broking domain. We have a difference in point of view in the sense that right from the beginning, we never want to distribute an existing product which I genuinely believed doesn't have product market fit, right? You could find the new market, but you combine all the startups, it would probably be less than 2 or 3% of the market right today, right? So fundamentally, our whole thesis is on how do we improve coverage in India, from $10 billion to $100 billion, for example. And that will happen. Now, can we accelerate that, right? If it happens over 25 years, can we bring it down to 8 years, 10 years? And that is where that's where I think as approaches go, we came in with a different approach. It doesn't mean that, we are in conflict or we're in competition with many of the companies. They are actually, and we are also, like I said, we are also not playing in the same exact same markets, at least largely, right? There would always be overlaps. So to come back to your question, I think for us, we don't look at, the way we look at D2C is we already are at more than 1 million members, 1.2 million members today. We want to be able to offer these members add-on and to meet all their expenses, right? So these members have been acquired because their corporate might have thought, let's give them something, right? But no corporate can cover all your healthcare expenses themselves. They will have a budget, but can these members actually add on a plan in the OPD preventive space? And over a period of time, we want to be able to shift spends towards prevention, right? So I was just telling somebody, I was in Singapore with my wife and kids, I think 2 weeks back. And over there, it is a matter of office discussion whether you've done your vision checkup or dental checkup, right? Here, we are still far away from that culture, right? If you ask people around, in general, you will find that people don't do a lot of these checks, right? At the max, they would, because there is awareness, they would probably do a health checkup, which, probably is a basic one, right? So we want to be able to move both awareness, engagement, the motivation to sort of take care of yourself, and that's the path we are on, through health plans which are customized to every individual, right? So that's the path we have taken, basically.
Interesting. When you think about it as a startup founder, right? I mean, the last 4 to 5 years have been a little topsy-turvy.
Yeah.
You had unbridled exuberance in 2021 where everyone and their uncle were raising money, boatloads of it at ridiculous valuations, and suddenly the market corrected as it does, right? And suddenly, profitability, sustainable growth, all of these things are back in fashion right now.
Yeah.
Now, for a founder, right? I mean, if you run a business of a significant scale, I mean, you'll go through these cycles multiple different times, right? So I wonder how you keep an even keel about things, right? So how do you make sure that you're always prioritizing the right thing for your business? And perhaps, I mean, the market can influence that to a certain degree, but how do you make sure that you are doing what you have to do?
Yeah, I think, like I have a friend who's a pilot, and the only thing which matters to pilots is you have to fly the plane first, right? So for entrepreneurs, whether it's 2021 or 2022 or 2023, what I tell my team is the first priority is to run a business profitably, right? Right from day one, right? In the sense that at least your objective should be to attack profit pools, okay? And often, sometimes the priorities could be like, how much have you raised, or but honestly speaking, I always considered capital, which true accounting terms, the liability, right? Because your shareholders have to sort of earn a return. The only way they earn a return is if you can, show the money. And even the IPOs have sort of proven that, right? I think we are at a stage where last four years, or especially the last two or 3 years, have seen many IPOs from early stage companies. And there are both winners and losers out there. And what is very clear is free cash flow and profitability matters, right? So you're in the business of business. First thing is to understand, what are the demand drivers? How do I, fulfill that demand profitably? To be very candid, everything else at a founder level is a little bit secondary.
Ancillary to the business.
Exactly, because free cash flow is oxygen for the business, and the idea needs to be that you have to be independent. As a company has to be independent. You could attract a lot of investors, but the ultimate for a company is that you're not dependent on anybody else, because company as a definition is a permanent entity, right? So survivability, profitability, I think those are core aspects, which we, to be very honest, 2021, everybody was raising money, and at that stage, we did raise a small round in 2022.
I'm familiar with that.
Yeah, yeah. So at that stage, to be very honest with you, we didn't press the fundraise button very early in our we actually bootstrapped for almost 2 years, understood what it takes to where is the demand, how do you fulfill it, what are all the moving parts, how do you get control over it, right? That's the other thing I would advise any founder who's listening to this, that your default should ideally be yourself and bootstrapping, and that should be a default, right?
Capital when necessary.
Exactly. Over a period of time, hopefully, there is some luck. Whatever you've thought through has also resulted in some success. It will attract investors, because any good business will attract investors, right? I genuinely think that 2021 was a little bit of an aberration. If you it was crazy times, because 2020 I quit my job and there was COVID, and I was sort of frozen for a month as to what to do now, right? What to build, and so on and so forth. It was fortunate again that we chose a space which had tailwinds, a lot of spaces just folded up then and there.
Yeah.
I was very surprised, pleasantly surprised, when there was this, there's a capital boom, right, in 2021. Nobody could project that in 2020.
Yeah.
Everybody was on webinars discussing. I was on a BCG alumni call, and the only constant thing was nobody knew what's going to happen, right? And people are talking about all sorts of curves, V shape, U shape, but nobody knew what's going to happen. So a lot of things are not in our hands. Whatever is in our hands is the business that we are running. If we focus on frugality, so we've been a very, very low CAC acquisition model right from day one. That is something that we, and then a lot of the fundraise questions are why do you need this money? We always struggle to answer that, right? Because our model is that it's largely groups. We are actually helping somebody meet a demand, and because we are doing that, there's literally we were at near zero CAC. We have a small CAC now, but it's a very, very low CAC model that we've sort of built out, right? And that is something that is again by design, by also maybe because now I can say there's all the three of us are 40 plus now, so we are a slightly different kind of company that way, right? We've started off when we were nearing 40s. We are all dads, right? So maybe what experience teaches you also shapes what you build as a founder.
Absolutely. I think that's one of the primary lessons I learned from my founding journey, which is to ask yourself, what do you want out of this experience, right? I mean, and then pivot everything around that. Hey, so this has been a fascinating discussion. Right, got to understand many facets of insurance, right? And before we let you go, any books or podcasts that you would suggest to the audience?
Yeah, so I like to read a lot of non-fiction, Roshan, and I like to read things which are not exactly what I do in my day-to-day life, but around that. For example, right now,
that seems to be an important trait, right? I mean, to be able to have these adjacents, because it kind of widens your focus a little bit, right?
Absolutely, and especially, like I've said in today's discussion as well, it would have been wrong for us to say that, look, we are insurance only, right? The word insurance has a lot of preconceived notions. So we said that, look, let's look at what the customer wants, right? So you have to be broad enough in the business as well. Coming back to the books. Right now I'm reading this book called The Chip War by Chris Miller. I would really recommend that, given how the semiconductor industry is shaping up, and it's a very asymptotic industry in the sense that few people cover, control the supply, demand, etc. I've also been I've just finished reading a few books around a little bit about philosophy, but a little bit about business and a little bit about life as well. So there is this book called A Guide to the Good Life, right, by William Irvine. So I would sort of recommend that. It goes back to the ancient sort of Greek and, what their philosophy about leading good life is, especially when the chips are down and everything seems desperately bad, right? So what do you do then, right? So really would recommend that. There are also some very nice books by Clay Christensen, who I sort of
Clayton Christensen,
How
to Measure Your Life.
How to Measure Your Life. Then for folks who are building in healthcare, there is a book called The Innovator's Prescription, which actually didn't sell too many copies, but for folks who are building in health tech or healthcare, it is something that is a very, very good perspective. Of course, the Innovator series, Innovator's Dilemma, Innovator Solution, how do you measure your life, right?
Right.
So those are some things that I would recommend. Podcasts, of course, I think there I try to be in sync with the startup world. So most of the venture firms, they run good podcasts. I love this podcast around business breakdowns, right? Coming from a consulting background, and it's very, very well done, right? They take both publicly listed companies which have sort of, and around the world, right? And they break it down into their atomic elements. Yeah. So business breakdown is something that I follow, and I loved some of the episodes from your podcast as well, right? So
very kind. Thank you.
So I really like the work that you're doing here. And wish you the best as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Shashank. This was a fun conversation. Wish you all the best for everything that you have coming up, and hopefully we catch up again.
Hopefully, Roshan.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for joining us on another episode of the Startup Operator Podcast. If you like this content, don't forget to share, subscribe, do all of the good stuff. I'll be back on another episode with another interesting founder and another interesting startup.